500, and that was just a monster of a car. You know, you needed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime to be able to work that clutch. It was just such an anvil and hammer of a vehicle, right?
Exactly.
You were talking about like the ability to change the car's dynamics. So we do have a dynamic control here that you can do like that, right?
Okay.
So that puts it into dynamic control, and then you can of course go over, when you go over to drive, flick it over to sport mode. And then unlike the Mustang where you have a 6-speed manual, here you have an 8-speed automatic with paddle shifters.
Okay.
You also have a 5-liter, but this one has a supercharger on it, so that puts out considerably more power.
Yes.
And you can go in here if you want. We can try it. You can go in here and you can customize a lot of settings. So you can customize how much, steering feel you want. You can customize the dampers. There's a lot of different things you can do to it. But let's just try it in sport mode and dynamic mode, and turn off the traction control manually. How about that?
Yeah, it's always fun.
So now you're in sport mode.
Okay.
And we've got the better exhaust. It opens up the sound of the exhaust. This has some of the best exhaust note in the world, I think.
Yeah, it's nice.
It is nice. It's like I say, from my point of view, it's a stunning car. It's just a little tight on the inside for big guys like me and for tall guys like you, I would think.
Yeah. I'm not quite settled on the seating. You know, I guess playing around with it, you get used to it, but it is a little tighter.
Now the big change, of course, from the one you drove last time, which was the R Coupe, is that now all F-Types have Jaguar's all-wheel drive. And the system works very simply. It's a rear bias system, so most of the power goes to the rear wheels, but when you start to lose traction or the system senses that you're losing some traction in the front, it can send up to about half of that, a little bit less than that, to the front wheels. But mainly it's supposed to drive and feel like a rear-wheel drive car.
Yeah, I read they want to keep the rear-wheel drive characteristic and feel of the car, but obviously you want the performance of the four-wheel drive once you start to slide the car around.
Yeah, and also interestingly, both these cars share the same tires. They both have P700s, or P0, sorry.
Yeah. I love that lift off. You know, you hear the crackling through the exhaust.
Yeah, that's on purpose, you know that. They engineered that.
That's... And you feel that torque.
Yeah.
That's where torque really comes in.
And both these cars have massive brakes.
It's good, because it's got some straight line speed. Gets into the corner a little bit cleaner. That's fun. And it's got a lot of grip.
It does have a lot of grip. It's got a lot of grip. You know, in the Mustang you said there's no such thing as too much power. And this is a perfect example of that. Even on this tight little track.
I love how it turned in there. Wow. You know, it's gained a little bit of weight going to that four-wheel drive.
Yeah. And of course the convertible.
And the convertible, in the convertible. Actually, I totally forgot about that. it didn't gain a lot of noise. You know, normally you go convertible, you gain some wind noise. It didn't. But you've gained a little bit of weight from that. But it doesn't feel like it. And the car still feels nimble. It still wants to get around the corner. And it turns in well. It's really positive on turning. And it really tries to get you to the apex. I mean, we're on a very tight track here for this type of car. But it doesn't mind, you know, you just keep turning the wheel, it keeps trying to get down into the corner, and
would it be fair to say that you felt more comfortable faster in this car when you brought it up to speed than you did in the Mustang?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, it's still We've put it in the basic track mode, so the traction control was still kicking in slightly, but when it kicked in, you know, rather than so much cutting the power away, the car is trying to take off, it just opens up your radius. So, you know, there's a couple of times I went on the power and I had to just ease off to tighten up the radius because, you know, it gained grip.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like you were working too hard. I mean, it felt like you were working, but it was well within your comfort zone, and you didn't feel like you were, you know, it didn't feel like the thing was going to bite you right away. It just felt like you were well within kind of that zone of going fast and yet keeping it under control.
Yeah, I mean, there was actually a few corners there, and we were just building it up over the 10 corners that we have here, but it took me a while to actually get towards the limit.
Yeah.
You know, the first couple of times I was pushing it and went into the corner, I underdrove it. It's like, wow, this, you know, like you said, it's got the same amount of grip, but obviously, you know, it takes a little bit more to get to the limit, so, you know, that's where the...
All right, so what's your money on, the Mustang or the Jaguar?
My money's on the Jag.
Yeah.
You know, it's. You might say it's because I'm British, but no, I think it's probably the extra $70,000 that's you know, takes this into a different class. But you know, that's where all the engineering really starts to pay off. Is getting that extra lap time out of a car and that extra performance. We call it lap time on the racetrack, but you know, that performance on the road and the grip, you know, is, you know, obviously the difference in cost.
Yeah, and of course, 120 some odd horsepower. It doesn't hurt.
No, well, the key is actually the torque.
Yeah.
You know, the
100 more pound-feet of torque.
Yeah, and that's where the mid-range, it really takes off. I like everything about it. You know, you jump in here for the first 10 seconds, like, okay, everything is pretty much where it should be and feels comfortable, and you know, so let's take it round, go and see what it drives like. No substitute for a large engine.
I thought you'd be more like the subtleties of of the car are much more important than the size and displacement of the engine.
As we keep telling our technicians at the racetrack, there's not been a stage where I've said that's too much power, we need to turn it back. You know, it's always, can we have more?
More power, yeah. Yeah, I suppose when you're really racing, extra torque and horsepower comes in handy, especially in any part of the racetrack, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it comes with the cost of added weight.
Yeah, that's always the trade-off. You can't have both. So I like the sound of this though. You open it up.
Yeah, there's something about American V8 that just is right.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like youth and fun and power.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, you know, you do have a manual, and in a lot of ways now, for you, I'm sure it's much easier to have the paddle shifters. This is very old school.
Yeah, it is. But the clutch is really light. I mean, the first couple of gear changes I did, I kind of messed up because the clutch is so light. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, you said you drove the previous GT 500, and that was just a monster of a car. You know, you needed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime to be able to work that clutch. It was just such an anvil and hammer of a vehicle, right?
Exactly.
It was almost undrivable. There you go. You're getting a feel for that back end coming out a little bit.
Still trying to kick in.
So it's still not completely defeated.
Yeah, if you do something stupid and get on the throttle before you really turn, it'll say, well, I don't think you should want to do that. That's pretty good.
It's pretty much a second gear track, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
But, you know, all the electronic aids, you know, we've got that on the base track performance, and you know, it's letting you push the car and push it into the corner. You can feel the car rotating and moving, but if you just stand on the gas pedal mid-corner, it says, you know, you gotta tame this down a little bit. So I'm sure, yeah, you know, the physics of the car's not gonna allow you to do that. So yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, you can feel a little bit of weight. It's a little bit slower to get into the corner. You gotta be more patient on entry, but you know, first impression, nice car. We'll see what it'll do against the clock.
You mind the electric steering? Do you care about that? You know that there's no direct connection between the steering wheel and the wheels anymore?
Every car you'd seem to drive these days is going that way.
Yeah. It's more fuel efficient. It allows them to customize the feel, sort of, kind of, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I prefer the direct feel of the older style cars, but everything is going to this electronic power steering now. And you know, the race cars, IndyCar doesn't have electronic power steering, doesn't have any power steering, but all the sports cars that I drive all have electronic. You know, it's just so much easier and cheaper and more efficient for the teams to work on. So you kind of get used to it after a while. It's taken away a little bit of that feel, but it's becoming the new standard.
How about the independent rear suspension? Can you tell the difference?
Yeah, definitely. You know, last time I drove a Mustang, it was the old-fashioned solid rear end, and
yep.
You know, as soon as you load the car up in the corner, the back would break away. A lot of fun to drive, but you would slide in the back everywhere all the time, even without pushing it. Whereas this, you can feel it's a bit more supple. You feel the back end gripping, and you carry a lot more speed through the middle of the corner.
So great car for drifting, not so great for carrying a lot of speed around the corner. The old one.
The old one, yeah. The new one is definitely a bit more refined, a bit more corner orientated. You know, it wants to deal with the corners as well as the straight line performance. As I said on camera, I didn't talk a lot. I was concentrating on my driving because it is so rapid in a straight line.
Yeah, and let's be honest, this is $70,000, give or take, more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different class to the Mustang.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the same 5-liter engine, so V8 engine. So you start with that, and you think, okay, so, you know, it's fun to compare the two different classes, but you know, both great cars.
So I have a rematch idea. When Ford introduces the Shelby GT 350 next year, we'll have to get it out here and see if you can drop 3 seconds.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun to see.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.